Could you please pronounce your name correctly for me?
Norwegian way to say it is Erling Kagge, but I'm not very fussy on it. So, please feel free to call me whatever you like.
Okay, let me try it. Erling?
Yeah, your Norwegian is improving.
I have a partner, Kunstsentrene I Norge, and so I've been trying to learn my pronunciation.
Matthew is easier.
Yeah, well, I get Matthew a lot.
Yeah.
Or Matthias is a very common one as well, but it's fine. My wife is Czech, so like I've just learned to accept these things. Now, you do many things in your life, or I should say you have done many things in your life. So like, I guess the question, because of course we can all research what you have done. What are you doing these days?
I'm a book publisher, so I started this book publishing company 25 years ago to be able to have an interesting job, but also to, live a family life and have a job. I enjoy it. It's kind of the best of, the commercial world and the intellectual world every day. So it's a good job.
What kind of books are they focused on publishing these days?
We do all kinds of books. We publish around 100 new titles every year.
That's a lot.
It has become quite big. It's the biggest now in Norway on Norwegian nonfiction. So, but we also do children books, fiction, great variety.
No art books, no monographs?
I can't afford to do art books, I think. I wrote one myself called Poor Collector's Guide to Buying Great Art, and that one is doing well, actually.
Well, and that's one of my big questions is, of course, you wrote this book. It got published back in 2015. And I wonder what has changed since 2015 with your experiences in the art world. I mean, not obviously with pandemic, but I mean just in general with the internet and social media and all the other things that have come up.
I think the basic is still the same in the sense that, as many people have said before me, like great art is great art and everything else is everything else. But of course, when you look the details, many things have changed. As I said, like, the digital world, the way they sell art, promote art, tell about art, and of course about artists have totally changed in a great way. And also, of course, the focus on, when I started out as a collector, it was mostly white male artists. That was kind of at least, a major part of the art world. And of course, today that has changed. So it's, in that sense, many substantial changes.
Is that an important thing for you these days to make sure to have, I guess the easiest word is like representation?
Yeah, it has always been important for me. I'm not collecting art to be kind. I collect because I would like to build a great collection and, according to my own taste and feelings and different experiences. But when I started out collecting, it was just obvious that art made by female artists were lower priced than art made of kind of the same quality made by male artists. So I started out buying a lot of female artists, of course.
Okay, help me out. I've wondered this one, and I've asked this numerous times to other people. Why are female artists valued lower than male artists?
I guess you should ask some historians on this, on the history of gender. But it has been like this throughout the history for as long as I'm aware, that in art has been, mostly not been made by men, but mostly, the art that has been promoted and shown in a great extent has been made by men. Even go further, I think, when I started out collecting, as I also write about in the book, it was not only men and white men, but also quite often white men from a privileged background. Nothing wrong with having a privileged background, but of course you're missing out on lots of great art when they are in favor.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting the way that basically the art history has been written by the victors, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And also not only written, but also kind of, fully organized and paid for and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sure we have been missing out, obviously I've been missing out on some really, really great art.
Well, and I wonder, okay, you're up in Norway. Where are you, in Oslo, or where are you?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
I was raised and grew up in Oslo, and I still live here. And I used to travel all the time, but now due to the pandemic, I have spent most of my time in Norway, which has been great.
Now, do you feel like you're connected to the greater art world? I mean, I know you go to art fairs and things like this, but like, does it feel like you're a bit separated, living sort of at the edge of Europe?
Close to the North Pole. Yeah, in one way, yes, and the other way, no. Yes, in the sense that I feel very much connected to the art world. And obviously, if you live in New York, you're more able to see more great art in the flesh. But, when I speak to people living in New York, somehow they don't see more great art than me in the flesh. So I feel very much connected. But then on the other hand, being this far away, you're not kind of part of the rumor mill, for instance. Like, you don't meet people at cafes and listen to, what's the latest, blah, blah, blah. So you're kind of missing out on, a little part of the Folkgeist, whatever you're going to call it. But that's okay. But, I have focused on trying to live a rich life. So I really don't have time either for all this kind of blah, blah, blah. So in that sense, it's also an advantage to be a little bit away.
I totally understand, because I know a lot of people that lived in New York and they're always like, I live in New York and I love being in New York, but like they don't have time to really participate in the things that tourists sort of perceive as like the New York lifestyle, because they got to make so much money to live there.
Yeah, New York, I love New York, but New York is very much about making money. But, it's the same all over the world. If you're really close to something, you quite often you don't care that much. But, when people tell you that don't have time, uh, that's obviously they tell the truth in the sense that that's how they feel. But I think in general, it's wrong in the sense that average people today spend like 4 hours daily doing social media. If you live, until 83, 84, whatever the average, that adds up to about 120,000 hours of your life, or about 13 years, day and night. That's why you feel you're short on time and why you feel life is short. But, life is long if you don't waste it.
We do waste it a lot. I do. I know I do, for sure. It's sad.
It's okay.
Yeah.
But, I think it's important because when you get older than you and me, when turns 70, 80, 90 years old, when you listen to what people talking about it, they're kind of saying like this old Swedish poet who wrote something like, all these days and weeks and months that passed by, I didn't really understand that was life. It's banal, but it's also kind of deep. You should just make sure not ending up in that situation.
Yeah, I always say that I want my life to be a lot of great stories.
Exactly. I agree.
Wow. Yeah, you've done some amazing things in your life, no doubt. But let's get to the sort of the art collecting part, because that's the thing, of course, that fascinates me the most. So I've read a little bit about you. I know the sort of like how you started and stuff, but like, so right now you have like, what does your collection look like? How many pieces do you have these days?
I don't really count, but I think it's around 800 pieces.
Okay. And are you still buying?
Absolutely.
So, so the thing all artists want to know is like, how do or what do collectors? So in this case, what do you look for when you're like saying, like, I mean, because like the average person who buys art would be, I need something to match my curtains and my sofa. But you, I'm sure, are not that reason. So you have other reasons why you buy a piece of art. So what would some of those be?
Absolutely. I think, it's, as you say, Matthew, one way is to buy art because you would like to have something nice in your living room that kind of fit your sofa or whatever. But I think as a collector, first of all, I think you need to collect with your heart and somehow follow your own path. Obviously, you need to listen to people and you need to read a lot in addition to seeing art, because art collecting is not about having the perfect eye. I don't think the perfect eye exists. I think you collect with your eyes, with your ears, and with your nose. And I also think, like, for me, who I had to work a lot to be able to pay my bills and pay for my kids' education, etc., etc. So I don't have time to study art every day, all day. And that's why I also need to be ahead of my own taste. Like, quite often people ask, like, do you buy things you don't like, or do you only buy things you like? Of course, I buy things I don't necessarily like. I think all this like culture has gone way too far. Life is much more fun and complex than you can measure it in like or dislikes. So what I quite often do, I see something, I get curious about it, I start to wonder if this is something I can grow with, if this is something which I will find more interesting time to come. Then I buy it if I think so. I'm never 100% certain. I think, I'm never 100% certain on anything in life, partly because I've been wrong on almost everything so far, but also because I think the pandemic has taught us that nothing is certain. But then I buy it, and then, I live with it for a while, maybe take it, away and then back into the house. So, to live with art and to grow with the art. And I don't care about if it's painting or drawing, installation or video, whatever, medium it is. I just go for it. And I also like to collect artists in depth. It's a great privilege. And I can't give a really rational answer either. It's a kind of irrational thing to do, but lastly, I have to also add that, you need to believe. I think if you're going to collect contemporary art, you need to believe. If you collect older art, that art historians, etc., already judge whether it's great or not, you can just believe in them. But if you collect contemporary art, you need to believe in what you're doing. You need to believe in what you're seeing. And I think that's super important. So if you don't believe, you should stay away from contemporary art. You should probably stay away from love and many other important things in life too.
Well, I read some articles where you talked about how you like collecting younger artists. And that belief position, I think, comes into that a lot, because you sort of have to have a little bit of faith that these people will continue to make art, A, and B, they will continue to make good art in some way in the future. Yeah?
Yeah, I buy young art for several reasons. One is that it's more difficult, and I believe in making life more difficult than it has to be. As a Norwegian, obviously, if I had been born in southern Sudan, it would have been different. But as a Norwegian, I'd like to make it more difficult. And also, it's also more interesting in the sense that to follow a career, because you really are, so many good and bad things can happen in that career. So it's kind of interesting to be early on. And of course, also price-wise, you get in on more sympathetic level. But of course, then again, if the artists stop making great art or something else sad is happening, it didn't make sense after all. But I don't think about buying art as investments. I'm more thinking about it as consumption, in the sense that I don't expect to get a huge return. I love a good deal and I don't want to pay more than necessary, but I don't think about it as investment. So whenever a journalist calls me up and asks about how to invest in art, I just say I'm not the right person.
Yeah, I don't know anything about how to invest in art.
No. Even your dentist will ask you, if you're into art world, what can I buy that can improve in value?
You can buy lots of things in life that'll do better, more reliably than art.
Absolutely. But you can't hang it on the wall or place it on the floor. That's a big difference.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
That's the beauty of art, that you can actually live with it and be a part of it. So it's for me, it's not a hobby, it's a lifestyle. I just love it.
Well, you mentioned that you like sort of in-depth purchasing. So it sounds like you buy like a number of pieces from an artist. Because I know some collectors that only buy like the one piece by an artist that truly moves them and connects with them. And then I know others that sort of run down the line of sort of being a patron for decades and supporting them over their lifetime kind of thing. So where do you fall sort of in that spectrum?
Not the first one. It's a few artists I have kind of one piece because I think it's a super important artist and they came in late and just want to have one great piece. But in general, I buy, from 3 or 4 or 5 up to 25 pieces or 30 pieces of an artist I'm interested in. So I go all the way. I'm not the kind of guy who's settling with a little bit. I want it all.
That's a lot from a single artist. 25 to 30 pieces?
Yeah. But if you happen to buy Raymond Pettibon at I wouldn't say even an early stage, but at a stage where it's still kind of reasonable to buy. Well, you can still buy it at auction, actually, fairly reasonable. So then I just kept on buying. And I'm not the kind of guy who's regretting that many things. So, I'm happy. But, if I hadn't bought that Raymond Pettibon, I would spend the money on something else. So it's because for many years I spent everything I have on art.
No, do you have, okay, I'm wondering, I've always interested in collectors. Like, do you have everything you own on display? Do you have storage? Like, how do you manage the sheer sort of space necessary for all this?
I don't think anyone in the world has space at home to have 800 works.
I don't know the size of your home, so.
No, exactly. But I'm not living in Brunei. I'm not the sultan in that country. But I'm living with the art in the sense that I'm circulating a lot. I'm filling up the house with art. And so I'm very much also physically connected to the art. But of course, I need to have a warehouse, but I also have an office where I have my art. And then the last year and a half, I had 3 major museum shows with my art in Museion in Bolzano, Italy, and Fondation Van Gogh in Arles in France, and Sala Santander in Madrid, Spain. So, that's unbelievable, great way, privileged way to see your art being curated by top people at Museion and the 2 other shows by Beecher Kuriger. So that was, that's a great way to see art.
Well, now you're building out this huge collection, and you even talked about sort of like wanting to build a good collection. But like, what's your hope for the legacy of this collection? So, are you going to at some point, pass it on to your children? Is this going to be passed on to a museum? Do you want it to be known as a collection of blah blah blah? Like, do you have a focus, like Norwegian, Scandinavian works, like? What's the legacy that you're hoping to build with this collection?
So far, not much. I haven't been thinking that way. It's, I'm 58 years old, and as most of the people aged 55, 58, I really hope to live for a long, long time. And as for kids, so what to do with it, it's difficult because, it's a very expensive lifestyle just to keep it, it's in shape and store it well. Insurance, it's expensive, so you can't really expect anyone to earn that much money. I have been very fortunate in my life to earn good money, but you never know. So, and in terms of museums, yeah, maybe I think, parts of it will be given away to museums, and hopefully some of my kids would also like to have some of the art, at their homes, but it's way too much. And also some of the pieces are too important, to have it in public places.
All right. So when you're playing, I guess let me take this back a step. So like, how in your mind do you buy art? Now I'll give you my example of what I'm trying to figure out. Do you have a budget where you sit down and say like, okay, this year I have this amount of money to buy art? Or is it, do you fall in love with things and then you spend whatever's necessary?
Sometimes I wish I had a budget I would follow. But I think for most art collectors, like, your budget somehow ends up being a slave to your passions. Like, you start all the passions and then you have to solve financial challenges afterwards. So it's touched with not recently, but like, quite a lot when I started out collecting art 22 years ago. I was laying awake at night, cold sweating, being nervous about all the money I'd spent in Art Basel. So yes, as I said earlier on, it's not rational. If I had been more rational, I would never collected so much art, and I wouldn't walk to the South Pole either.
Okay. And how do you find your artists? So you mentioned, and I've also read things about how you find trusted partners. So are you purchasing through advisors, galleries, or are you going directly to artists? So like, what's your sort of methodology?
The best would be if I had, such great eye and understanding that I could just walk into academy or whatever and just pick the best art from the best artists right away. But I'm not that good. I'm not, and also time-wise, it doesn't make sense to me. So I need to trust other people. So I trust great gallerists. So I wait, not all the time, but almost all the time. I have a few exceptions, actually, that I bought art from artists before they had a gallery, like Ann Imhoff and also Alex Hubbard and a few artists. But I like to hang out and deal with gallerists that kind of share my own tastes and values. And they pick an artist, and then I start to look into the artist. And then I have gallerists in many parts of the world that, that are great galleries, and they usually offer me some of the best they have at an early stage. And then I stay loyal to them because they are loyal to me, and most importantly, because they have a great talent for finding great artists.
Yeah, I've often heard the relationship between whether it's gallerist and artist or gallerists and collectors is kind of like dating. Like you try and really find just that right match of concept, aesthetics, their eye, their skill level.
But fortunately, you don't need to sleep with them. That's good. But it's really close. I'm really, to some gallerists, I'm very close. Which again, I didn't start collect art because I want to have more friends. But it's the social side. It's kind of a side thing, but also very, very important, both with the gallerist and also with the artists.
Now, I saw a thing where you have sold some pieces, but do you sell your works on a regular basis? So like, is your collection sort of growing and then sort of selling and then regrowing kind of thing? Or is it more keeping and less selling?
It's definitely more keeping. One way it would make sense to be better at selling. I've been good at buying art, but not so good at selling art. But it's, the mindset. It's like if you buy and sell back and forth, you need to think like a trader. And it's nothing wrong with it, but it's kind of not for me. I prefer to buy art and keep the art, but sometimes some pieces I have increased 50 times and even once 100 times in value. Then I can get more fond of the money than the art piece, sell the art piece and spend the money on buying, other art. So then, a corrupt Russian oligarch or something can have the painting, and I get the money. And because I've always been short of money, I spend all my money on buying a nice house for me and my family, and after that I spend everything I earned on art for many, many years.
Well, before that, it was on doing, world traveling expeditions.
Yeah, so then I neither had money nor time to buy art, but I was seeing art all the time through the 80s and 90s, but I never had the means nor the time to kind of start to buy. In the 80s and 90s, I bought maybe one or two pieces a year, and I lived with it and I enjoyed it. But I don't think about that as art collecting.
Yeah, what was that transition from like buying a couple pieces to sort of really thinking I want to be a collector?
In the late 90s, I started to earn good money. I bought this house where I'm still living. I didn't want to, buy cars and summer houses and all the usual stuff that Norwegians spend money on, or stocks or real estate projects and blah, blah, blah. My heart was with the art. I understood that a lot of Norwegian art, local art, was very highly priced because there's so much money in circulation in Norway. So I saw that, in London and New York, you could buy world-class artists for less than you bought a local artist in Norway. So I started to buy international art. And of course, I also had some great Norwegian artists that are international. So I kind of went outside Norway, started to buy. I met this gallerist called Atle Gerhardsen early on in Berlin. He introduced me to great gallerists, great artists. I loved it. And also, I have to add, late 90s, I went to Astrup Fearnley Museum. I saw this diptych by Richard Prince, cowboys riding on a horse. And I just felt, if this Norwegian is able to buy such great art, so should I be. So that kind of, until then, I thought it was, almost too difficult because, so many galleries are playing a game, getting hard to get hold of. And, all they want is to sell you some art, but, they try to, what do you call it in English? Like, take the nose high up in the air, don't want to speak with you. No, it's on hold, blah, blah, blah. But when I got past that barrier, it has been great since.
It is a bit of a barrier. Like I've worked in galleries and I've also, of course, gone into galleries, and there is that sort of elitist nature to that. That once you start buying, somehow like the galleries are more accepting, and once, of course, you get articles written about you and write a book called a poor collector's guide to buying great art. Like suddenly people recognize you and they're a bit more excited and inviting to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That approach to customers is, it's just simply pathetic. But, it has been some rough times every now and then since. So I think, the art world has become slightly more democratic too. They can't really afford to treat people like shit. So I think it's better now, but it's probably, still a barrier to get into it. But it's definitely possible. I just advise people, if you find some galleries that kind of show art that you may come to appreciate or already appreciate, get to know the people and buy one or two pieces, pay your invoice right away, and be kind, say even thank you because they sold you the piece. Be interested, ask questions. And that's how you start to build a relationship with a gallerist. With other words, be curious and be kind.
Okay, speaking of that, do you meet the artists also, or do you only deal with like gallerists or sort of middle people?
The gallerist is the most important person for me in the art world because they kind of, they decide if you're going to get a really great piece or not such a great piece from the same show. So they are the most important. Then you end up meeting the artists, kind of some of the artists become friends, which I very much enjoy. As I said earlier on, I didn't start to collect to get new friends, but then you end up getting some friends and also some of the artists. I think today, not all the artists, but kind of most of the artists I collect, I know a little bit or know quite well. And as an art collector, it's nice, but many things in life are nice. But what's interesting is that when you get to know the artist and you can tell that the artist is almost one-to-one with the art she or he is making, that's a very good sign. Because sometimes you collect art and then you meet the artist, and the artist is a very different person from the art, which is a bad sign. So it's like, I'm a book publisher, as I said, like, somehow very seldom you manage to make a more exciting book than the person you are yourself. It happens though, which could be a very good thing, but in general, people not able to.
It's a great analogy. I love it. Now, okay, then when it comes down to it, because keep in mind, okay, I'm a professor and I'm also a practicing artist myself. So I always wonder about these kinds of little nuances of how collectors make decisions. When you see, okay, so you go to a gallery, so the gallery says, hey, there's this great new artist here, we're having a show. When you go, so devoid of the artist or the gallerist, when you're experiencing it, what's the sort of level of importance of the quality of the work versus, let's say, the statement or their CV or basically any of the text kind of things that is context for the work?
Not so much any of the text, and quite often the artists don't have that impressive CV. So no, it's the art piece in itself. I think it's for a while. Everybody had graduated from Städel in Frankfurt will be very, very hot, and many great artists came from that academies. But it's no, I think you have to look at the art piece and hopefully also some other art pieces the same artist has made, so you kind of get see what more it's about. Because just to see one art piece and buy it without knowing anything else, that's very, very difficult, I think.
Nice. Okay, so you're looking for somebody with a little bit of a track record, or at least has built out a full body of work.
Yeah. I wish, as I said, I had been better at collecting art and earlier, but, I'm not. So it's people are sending me emails and offering their works, and, it's nice, but it's not for me.
That never works, does it?
No, maybe for some, but I chose what I should collect and also who I should buy from. And that was from gallerists that, sell me art that I can appreciate to a price I can afford.
So you never do studio visits or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, yeah, it happens. Not so often because, when I don't buy, the artists get a bit disappointed, but it happens. Like I said, I went to Alex Hubbard's studio in New York with Ivan Furnesvik from Standard Gallery before Alex had a permanent gallery and bought two great paintings. I think I bought a video too. So it's these two paintings that day. That was great, but of course then I knew he was going to get a gallery, etc. But it was a very interesting visit, and I got great respect for what he was doing.
You mentioned that you collect basically lots of different mediums. So I heard painting, prints, video, all this. Like, so do you have some sort of criteria in your mind of like things that you like to collect versus, like, specifically, I guess, mediums that you like to collect versus others?
I end up with many wall pieces, but it depends on the artist. Like if you collect like Clara Lydén, or Trisha Donnelly or Seal Floyer or these artists, it doesn't make sense to just collect art pieces, wall pieces. You need the videos, you need installations, you need sculptures, it's etc. So it's very much depends on the artist. If it's an artist I'm really interested in, I go all the way.
I'm always fascinated. Okay, I don't make video art, but I'm always interested. Like, so when it comes to video art, when you buy it, what do you get? Like a USB drive with it, or like the film itself, like on a reel?
Still get kind of the physical cassette actually.
Uh-huh.
This last time I looked, but then of course, you also get, like, if I'm going to lend it to a museum or something, I just ask them to get the video from the gallery and send them digitally, and then you get the certificate.
Oh, certificates. That's okay. I'm a bit OCD about certificates of authenticity. Like, I create this whole thing. I do works on paper, so I do like matching numbered holograms on the back of the piece to the certificate of authenticity, and I'd like do it all up. I put like everything that's used, every paper, every ink, everything listed on. How important is this kind of stuff? Am I going overboard?
I think if it's a signed piece, I don't think you need a certificate. But for a video, for Lawrence Wiener wall painting, you certainly need a certificate.
All right.
But I guess in the future, lots of these certificates will be on NFT, so you don't need to keep them physically anymore.
Are you buying NFTs?
No, it's. I think it makes sense in many ways. Like, instead of having a certificate for an art piece, you can have an NFT. So, in many ways, it makes sense. It's not about being negative to NFTs, but of course, today it's absolutely hyped and lots of insider trading and price manipulations, etc., etc. So I'm just surprised that, it's my favorite paper is Financial Times. I'm just surprised they're not, writing about what's going on.
Yeah, I personally think it's just a money laundering scheme at this point.
It's not only that, but it's also money laundering, and it's many things. But I wish a journalist sat down, maybe someone had done it and hadn't seen it, just write proper articles of what it is really about. But it's also, it also makes sense with NFTs for many art pieces. So it's not like, as I said, it's not something to be against. But as of today, it's not regulated, but it's a crazy market, and you can launder money, you can do many things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm optimistic that it will sort of work itself out and figure out the best way for it to do. But I think at the moment, it's not its best self yet.
It's like cryptocurrency, like, you have first generation, then you have second generation, and now we're starting to see the third generation cryptocurrency emerging. So it's nothing to be said that's not to be against, because of course cryptocurrency has a great future. But I think maybe the first generation cryptocurrencies will have more limited future.
Unfortunately, I know nothing about cryptocurrency, so I can't really talk about that.
I think it's good for you.
I don't know. Back in like, what was it? It was like 2009. I had the opportunity to participate in Bitcoin and I didn't. And now I'm like, fuck, I should have done that.
Financially, obviously you should. But I think the problem is, it's kind of limited how clever you are, smart you are, and, not only you, but also me. So if you're going to speculate on cryptocurrencies, you really don't have the surplus to be a great artist or write or publisher or whatever at the same time. So I think you need to make choices. For my life, for instance, I do very little, hardly any speculation, because it just rips my mind apart, and I'm checking news all the time. And I don't have surplus to live the life I'm living now. So I don't regret not buying a Bitcoin or Tesla early or whatever, because, then I've been a different person, richer and more boring. So.
There is, yeah, that is a balancing act. But speaking of that, you mentioned that you don't live with regrets, but like, are there any things that you either did get the opportunity to buy that you regret buying, or anything that you missed out on and you regret sort of missing out on it?
Last question first. Yeah, I mean, every art collector have been missing out on so many great pieces. So it's just unbelievable to think about everything I've been missing out on.
Well, but is it missing out because you didn't like do it fast enough, or didn't believe in the person, or whatever? Like, why do you miss out? Is it your action or somebody else's action?
Could be all those reasons, but also, it could also be a personal thing, like you're not in the mood for buying art for a while because, you feel tired, or you're just busy with other matters. Or maybe you're short on money for a while, so you can't really kind of go for it. Or you have been buying a lot of art for a while, and just kind of just need a little break. So it could be many rational and irrational explanations. And of course, it could also be that you're just not smart enough. You don't get it, and then that's why I said you have to be ahead of your own taste, because you can't wait for Sometimes you get it, other times, talk for myself, I'm just too slow to get it, and then I just have to buy it before I get it. And sometimes I don't, and usually that's a good idea, but other occasions it has been a mistake.
Well, and you mentioned that earlier, which is like you try to buy sort of in advance of where you are, works that challenge you. Have you ever bought something that you was hoping would challenge you, and then you were like, no?
Yeah, I'm sure I have, many times, but I'm trying to learn from my mistakes, but I'm not like, it's, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then, we have it for a while, and then, maybe you take it out again, and then it starts to make sense again. I think a great art sometimes, it's just so complicated. It's kind of, it's hard to say if it was a good buy or not a good buy, I think.
So now you've got this collection that's being exhibited in museums. Have you gotten to a point where you've like hired a conservator to like help you store everything well and keep everything maintained?
I probably should see that, my peers, they have one or two, at least, full employees. I have a friend, a girl, Tuva, who helps me out with the collection. But in general, I do most things myself.
Somehow that makes sense, being the, explorer that you are, that you do everything yourself.
Yeah, but also, like, if you employ a person, it costs money, and then you can buy less art.
Everything's about buying art with you. I love it. All right. So let's finish this up. I got two questions I generally end with. So first one is easy, I hope. Are there three contemporary artists that you're looking at these days?
Yes, more than three.
Well, you're welcome to list more than three, but yeah, a little bit of why also would be great.
But, I'm not good at, there's nothing secretive about it, but it's more like, it's people like to know one artist they should look at, blah, blah, blah. But like, I think it's a little bit unfair. I would look at new artists, whoever arrives at Modern Institute in Glasgow, or Sadie Coles, whatever, in London, Arena Spalding in New York, Sean Regan in LA, Standard here in Oslo, Gallery Noy in Berlin, etc., etc. Whenever they have a new artist coming, I will check he or she out.
Well, that's okay. Let's take it back, because I understand a lot of collectors don't like talking about who they're looking at, because then things get crazy and all that.
Not because it gets crazy, but more like, it's, I think in general, people should not have three artists that I pick, and they should try to pick the same and look for it. So I'm not concerned about price hikes and blah, blah, blah. As I said, I have a good relationship to galleries, so I will be able to buy it ahead of whoever comes anyway. Yeah, I think, if you look at the gallery together, like, Standard in Oslo, it's Matthias Fallbakken, of course, Oscar Tuasson, this new Iranian artist called Asal, Mare Slåtteli, Gardar Einarsson, Chadwick. It's only in that gallery you will find Torbjørn Rødland. Only in that gallery you will find, 10, 12 artists that are worth watching and who are all international. Also, the Norwegian artists are, truly international. I mean, it's huge opportunities to buy great art. It's made so much art in the world today, and I think, also in the foreseeable future, so much more than the demand side. So I think the supply side will always be bigger than the demand side.
Sadly, that's true. Yeah. From my side as an artist. Now, okay, wait. One thing that I want to take a step back. You're in Norway and you're full on Norwegian. What do you think about the way that the Norwegian culture sort of supports the arts? Because I've heard debates about like the way that they support artists and arts in general.
I think, it's many good things with it in the sense like, in contemporary art as we are talking about, I think it's many reasons why Norwegians are doing well internationally. And first of all, I think, in period now, the first time since the turn of the 19th century, 120 years ago, that many Norwegians are actually making great art. That's, of course, most important. But one of the reasons they're doing it so is because, they're traveling, they're coming back again. International artists are coming to Norway. There's lots of interaction. And collectors, museums, etc. But also, like, one of the many reasons is because the Norwegian government is supporting many of these artists. They can have shows internationally, they can travel, they can stay abroad for a while. So I think, this in general, maybe not in all the details, but in general, this is working well. But on the other hand, in Norway, it's so many artists who get support from the government and so many writers and so many like this. So in that sense, they're kind of employed by the government. And that, again, is risky because, I remember my mother taught me when I was a kid that, we need intellectuals to stand up with their own opinions against the power, against the government, against, whatever. But of course, if you're paid by the government, it's not so tempting to criticize the government. So, sometimes I wonder in Norway that we don't need many intellectuals in Norway. We need one because they kind of all agree. It's not that bad though, but it's a paradox that, I remember the elections in Norway in 2013, the national elections. It's the artists and the authors and all their associations were parading the street in support of the present government. So I think that's probably the only democracy in the world where all the kind of intellectuals, all the artists are kind of marching the streets with banners and shouting in favor of the present government. So then you can wonder, what is the use of having them?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing because I come from America, of course, which is the arts and government oftentimes are either at odds or not in support of one another in so many different ways, and also not entwined together. And I mean, as much as I really, really love the amount of support that is given by the Norwegian government, it does beg that question of like, is it just basically end up being sort of art by committee? Because like basically they have to the artists have to kowtow to the governmental whims and their political positions in the creation of their art. Like, are certain artists getting these salaries and these supports because they do something that's sort of liked by the political establishment?
Definitely, yes. I think, for many artists in Norway, it's like, it's like being at Disneyland with a VIP card. It's like, you have prioritized and you will be well off and you will have ice cream whenever you please. But having said that, I think, a system like this is super generous. It's a bit naive, but the consequence is that it is fantastic art being made in Norway today. We have, really great literature coming from Norway, translated to, dozens and dozens of languages. So, somehow it works. And we can afford it because we have the oil. And of course, also many people, all artists are criticized, to the oil industry. But of course, it's the oil industry who's making it all possible that, people can live like this. So, but anyway, so I think it's like, it's easy to criticize, but the result is at this, at the top end, is really, really good.
Oh yeah, I lived in the United Arab Emirates before I moved to Prague. So like,
I was there for 2 days.
what'd you think?
I was in Dubai. I think, I'm happy I went, or maybe I was there for 3 days, but, everything is man-made. And I think, it's just said to last here in the podcast, like, I think for me, who spent lots of time in the wilderness, in nature, like, you learn that the most important things in life don't have any lasting forms. And I think when in Dubai, it's very easy to forget because everything is about objects and material matters. No moral judgment, but to me, that's just very boring.
Oh yeah, I refer to Dubai as the Vegas of the Middle East.
Yeah, but at least Vegas is a trend center.
Well, Middle East, yes. I mean, I enjoyed my time there. I was there for 6 years, 5 years, 6 years. I enjoyed it, but I'm glad I got out without being arrested.
Exactly. Yeah, me too. After 3 days, I was happy I didn't get arrested.
Yeah. All right. Last little question. Any advice for the next generation? So it could be of next generation of artists or collectors. Up to you.
I think, the most important is to get up from bed in the morning.
Very simple. Okay.
I remember when we walked to the North Pole, we said, think ahead, travel light, and leave your fears behind. That's, I think, is a good advice for an art collector too, and for an artist.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much.
All the best from Norway. Fortsatt god tur, as we say in Norwegian.
I hope you enjoyed and learned something from our conversation. After all, I am a professor. I like learning. I've learned a lot myself about many of the things that I did wrong in my career thus far, and many of the things that I need to put more effort into moving forward. I hope this podcast has inspired and assisted you in becoming more successful in your creative endeavors. If you like the podcast, we would appreciate a 5-star rating, and a nice comment would be greatly appreciated. I would also like to thank Ron Helt for their comment and 5-star rating. Thank you, Ron Helt. RNOHELTT. Don't know how to pronounce it correctly. I hope I got it right. Please tell your friends to listen and subscribe as well. You can subscribe on Apple's Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are produced by 5014. The audio was edited by Jakub Černý, and the music was created by my childhood friend, Pete Bybee. Thanks, Pete. The Wise Fool is supported in part by an EEA grant from Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, in an effort to work together for a green, competitive, and inclusive Europe. We would also like to thank our partners Hunt Kastner in Prague, Czech Republic, and Kunstsentrene i Norge in Norway. Links to EEA grants and our partner organizations are available in the show notes, or you can find out more information about the podcast on Instagram at TheWiseFoolPod, or on our website, which is simply wisefoolpod.com.